German concentration camps were labor camps. For instance, Auschwitz was a labor camp for the factory, Buna factory, so that had more than one purpose, and the same thing went for others. Patton realized that they needed some form of government to maintain order, so he didn't fire the Nazis. He kept them in positions that they had, and that got him in touch with the politicians who wanted to get rid of all the Nazis. Of course, they put them in concentration camps so they could denazify them, and I have a picture of a train of them up at near Bremerhaven who were on their way home, like we were on our way home. Also, the prison camp there in Darmstadt was also to denazify, and eventually they let them out. I think that's a good example of why you need government. Even a bad government is probably a lot better than no government at all. If you think bad government is bad, try anarchy sometime. Fortunately, by this time I had made corporal, so Bill Blake and I got this room together in one of the buildings. Of course, first thing we started doing then was furnishing it, so we tried to get little furniture and radios, stuff like that. I was always looking for a camera, of which I managed to do, but I don't think yet. I think that came later. And when we had left Salzburg, or up until about that time, regulations said you couldn't fraternize with the former enemy, so the guys who wanted a girlfriend couldn't legally do it. But anyway, I guess by the time we got up into Germany, that rule no longer existed. So naturally, that's the next thing to do, is find a girlfriend. And that there were lots of. There were, you must remember that by this time there were no young men in Germany. They were either dead or in prison camps. Before we got into the war, I drove a guy up into Canada to Cranbrook, BC. And at this time, of course, Canada was in the war, and they had drafted all the young men around. And you go into town, and there were no young men. It was absolutely amazing. Well, the same thing was going on in Germany. They were only worse there because there were men, a few, but there were no young men. I have pictures of these women out in the fields, in the farm fields. We'll show you here. But there were no young men in Germany. Anyway, the officers in Austria, headquarters battery had acquired von Ribbentrop's Mercedes limousine that they used in parades and whatever. And this Mercedes was the same as Hitler's, except that it wasn't armored. Still, it weighed 9,000 pounds. And when the general wasn't around, of which I never saw, the officers would use it to go out and have fun. One night, a bunch of them had me drive them around various places. I don't remember what they were doing, but before I left, I gassed it up. But on the way back, I ran out of gas. I had already dropped the officers off at their quarters by this time. Limousine. On the trip to Europe, when we took Frank Brown, we went to Melsungen and Darmstadt, Melsungen, the day we went up there on the train, we didn't have a lot of time. We were only going to have a couple hours there, and it was cold and it was miserable, so that was not a pleasant time. We stayed, I went to the Kaserne in Darmstadt, and we had our pictures taken with a soldier there who was kind of our guide. There was still no radio job open for me, so I continued to drive. Kassel, and the artillery headquarters was in the Kaserne there at Darmstadt. Occasionally I would have to go up to headquarters or up in some of the areas where perhaps the battalions were occupying the area. One time when I was driving the 1942 Buick, I thought I'd see how fast it would go. So I put it on the floor, and it got up to 92 miles an hour. Well, I figured, well, see, the freeways are clear, no traffic, occasional bomb crater that had been filled in. But I was going along at 92 miles an hour, figure I had the road to myself, and all of a sudden I heard something trying to pass me. Well, that scared me, because at 92, what would pass me at that speed? Then I looked up, and a P-38 just zoomed over me as if he was on a strafing run. Good thing it wasn't during the war. That would have been it. And another time, I thought I'd see how far, or how, it was about 120 miles from Frankfurt to Kassel. I thought I would see how fast a Jeep would go and how long I could keep my foot on the floor. So I floored the throttle, and 67 miles an hour as fast as that Jeep could go. So driving that Buick that fast, I'm not sure was a really smart idea, because who knows how old those tires were. I was able to keep my foot on the floor for about 30 minutes before I had to take it off. One time the colonel was having trouble, maybe this was later, anyway, he was having trouble finding someone to mend or modify his uniform. I was a driver, yeah, I was still his driver. I was just standing by while these officers discussed, probably going to find out how to get this uniform fixed. So what I could do about it. So, of course, what I did, went to the nearest German and asked him, hey, you got any tailors around here? So I went back to him about an hour later and said, yeah, there's this tailor over here in this town nearby. He said, how did you find out? I said, oh, well, ask questions. Anyway, he probably raised his esteem of me rose at that, although I don't know why. A very simple solution to the problem. Maybe they didn't want to talk to the Germans. They've been fighting them for so many years. The room we had there in Melsungen didn't have a shower, so we would have to go across the river on this bridge that Bill Blake is waiting for me to take his picture, where there were showers. Well, now we were done doing what we were to do up in Melsungen, so now they're going to move the headquarters battery of artillery down to Darmstadt. That's about 15 miles south of Frankfurt.